naive men pray to the gods. They will learn to pray to me.
I am the brains, you are the brawn.
You asked for it and it's here, Mordekaiser Reroll but with a feline twist. As you may be able to tell, the core of this comp is Mordekaiser and Yuumi, both of which are getting huge buffs in 1420, and together they make an immortal pair. Mordekaiser has a bigger shield and it lasts longer, meanwhile Yuumi grants insane heals alongside more AP. Furthermore, there's buffs to Mage and Vanguard which makes this comp even better. Thus, on all fronts, this combination is incredible on paper, and as we'll get into in this video, it's amazing in practice too. Mordekaiser genuinely becomes unkillable and he isekais everyone he ults. So, introducing the Horned King and the Cat. But before we delve into anything, as always let me know which units you want to see next. This video was voted on by subscribers and Discord members, so make sure you join so you can be part of the next guide too. But now let's delve into it. So what's the reason why I index so heavily on Mordekaiser being paired with Yuumi? I know many people, especially League players, hate Yuumi with a passion. So why is this cringe cat on this board? Well, the buffs to Mordekaiser result in superior synergy with Yuumi. That extra second results in Yuumi oftentimes healing Mordekaiser whilst he is shielded. And if you itemize Mordekaiser like I do, which I'll go over next, then Mord will also heal himself through his insane damage. Just the combination of these two sources of healing provide Mord with absolutely incredible sustain. Thus, with this build, Mord can double as both a damage carry and an incredible tank. But what do we play around Mordekaiser and Yuumi? Well, as Mordekaiser relies so heavily on his shields, we must enable them through his Vanguard trait. Mordekaiser absolutely adores 6 Vanguard because he shields himself so often with his extremely low mana cost ult. Therefore, 6 Vanguard is a must for Mordekaiser. Luckily for us, Galio is a Vanguard mage, thus we only need to play one more mage to activate the trait. And so we arrive at the following board, which is incredibly simple but really effective. Even with just 3 mage, Nora is an extremely reliable carry adjacent to Mordekaiser due to how incredible your frontline is. However, 2-starring Nora is a necessity for both herself and Mordekaiser due to Yuumi sharing Nora's star level. But do bear in mind that Ezreal is just filler on this board. While Portal is great utility, you don't really care about Blaster, and so you should drop Ezreal at the first opportunity. Your priorities are Vanguards of course, but also Mage. However, to play both 6 Vanguard and 5 Mage, you require an emblem for either. But in this game, my emblems were on my Trainer Sentinel. If you are given tangible emblems, who do you give them to? Simply put, you give the Mage back to Mordekaiser. Mordekaiser scales incredibly quickly with a Mage emblem as he stacks the shields as well as his damage amp. Mordekaiser scales so incredibly quickly to the point that your other items can be whatever. Like here, despite Mordekaiser having tank items, his damage output is still insane. Although this itemization still follows the recipe I've made for Mordekaiser, which we'll get to in a second. Nonetheless, whoever shall we equip with a Vanguard emblem? Well, ideally, a mage that shields would be the most appropriate, which is of course Vex. So with a Vanguard emblem, you give it to Vex, drop Warwick, and play 5 mage at level 9. But what happens at level 9 if you don't get a Vanguard emblem or a mage spat?
I have nothing he wants!
As I mentioned, you could just play Ezreal, but it won't be doing much for your board outside of Portal. Instead, something that is incredibly more powerful would be another Nami, which coincides with Bubble Trouble, the double Nami comp I invented last time. With 2 Namis, this board CC doubles, which buys plenty of time for Mordekaiser and whoever else to scale. Likewise, there's another variant of the Horned King and the Cat where you play 2 Namis, but this time it's around the 2 tanky augment. And so the board looks like this, and stacking star levels like this is really beneficial to both Portal and Eldritch. The Portal output will be stronger and the Eldritch summon will have more HP. However, there are no extra benefits to playing another Nora. Her spell does not provide any extra utility, you don't get another copy of Yuumi, nor does Yuumi receive any additional AP. Furthermore, from experience, if any copy of Nora dies, then so does Yuumi. Thus, in most circumstances, playing an extra Nora can actually be detrimental. Conversely, if you just played another Nami or even an extra Briar, you get vastly more utility. I've not seen the 2 tanky augment in a while, so if you try this version, please let me know how it went. I suspect that this version of the Horned King and the Cat is literally the best version, but I can't say for sure. If you want the full details on how to play around Nami and Bubble Trouble, then check out my guide on exactly that. But lastly, what do you start the game with until you find Nora? Well, typically mages and especially Soraka through something like this. Soraka's flat healing is very valuable early game and it keeps Mordekaiser alive as he scales. I've even played her into the late game until I find Nora. But that's not to imply her damage output is negligible, quite the opposite in fact. Soraka even at just 2-star can still be very meaningful as you enter the late game. But let's get into which items Nora and Mordekaiser want. To put it briefly, the recipe for Mordekaiser is pretty simple. Firstly, he wants one healing item so he can sustain between Yumi's heals. That's items like BT, Hextech Gunblade, Hodge, and Dragon's Claw. However, I believe generic Omnivamp items are far better than Dragon's Claw due to its HP regen being very small. As combat progresses, Omnivamp provides more healing as Mordekaiser will deal more damage and cast more frequently. Meanwhile, the healing from Dragon's Claw will fall off late game and it can't sustain the focus fire of enemy carries. In my opinion, Bloodthirster is the best choice due to its base stats alongside the shield that keeps him alive. And I would only recommend Hand of Justice if you're also building Dual Gauntlet. And that brings us to our next ingredient for Mordekaiser, which is an AP or damage item. Mordekaiser wants AP so it can deal more damage and shield for more. So that's just your standard AP and bruisery items like Rabadon, Archangels, Titans, Crown Guard, Adaptive Helm, and Dual Gauntlet. However, there is a small AP dilemma for Mordekaiser where too little and too much can be bad. Let me explain. If Mord has too little AP, then of course his shields and damage will be similarly small. Conversely, if Mord has a lot of initial AP, then his shields will be huge. At the start of combat, these shields likely won't be broken, and so Mordekaiser will be mana locked for the full 3 seconds, thus delaying successive casts and stacking their damage amp slower. Remember, the more damage Mord does, the more he will heal through BT. It's easier for Mordekaiser to ult more near the beginning of combat as he'll have way less aggro, whereas later into combat he'll take vastly more damage as more enemy units target him. Therefore, ideally, Mordekaiser has less AP at the start of combat so his shield is smaller and he can ult more often. However, as combat prolongs and your other tanks die, you want Mordekaiser to have more AP so he can tank the focus damage of the enemy board. Those reasons are exactly why I like Archangels and Yumi so much with Mordekaiser. They're backloaded. It typically takes around 15 seconds for Archangels to outscale Rabadon. That's why many units prefer Rabadon over Archangels, however for Mordekaiser it's the opposite. The massive shields from Archangels give Mordekaiser so much effective HP, especially when you combine it with the last ingredient, which are resistances. As a melee unit, Mordekaiser requires resistances to not get bursted by enemy carries. While Vanguard ameliorates that, the trait is only functional while Mordekaiser is shielded. Otherwise, between his shields, Mordekaiser is not tanky enough. For example, I tried full crit Mordekaiser here, and as is common with Mordekaiser Reroll, he was the last one alive. However, oftentimes I ran into the issue of Mordekaiser just not having any resistances. Therefore, I believe the second Hodge is just one step too far, and this Mordekaiser would have performed far better with just a stone plate over a Hodge. But generally, crit is good on Mordekaiser because it has synergy with his innate damage scaling, but perhaps a better way to get it is through augments. Regardless, the final item on Mordekaiser must rectify his current lack of resistances. Usually this is stone plate, but alternatives can be Crown Guard, Titans, and Protector's Vow. You can even build a Bramble Vest if your healing item is Dragon's Claw. Even so, the longer Mordekaiser can live, the harder he will scale and the more damage he can do, which he heals for. Of course, you could build Mordekaiser full tank, but that would still somewhat fit this recipe, however you'll certainly feel the lack of AP. Furthermore, you could also solo frontline Mordekaiser, however Yumi won't be able to outsustain the damage he takes against late game boards. But on the topic of Yumi, we should probably discuss Nora's items, as she too has a recipe. Of course, Nora wants AP for more damage and bigger heals through Yumi, then a casting item to cast more, and finally utility for even more casts or to apply debuffs to the enemy team. My favorite and most common build is Shojin, Morello, and Archangels. But if I have an abundance of items, then I'll move the Morello to Nami and give Nora Nash's Tooth or Rabadon. But that should cover both of the recipes for Mordekaiser and Nora. Lastly, as with any AP comp, we need Shred. Shred is necessary so you don't get stuck on tanks, as well as allowing Mordekaiser to heal more as he'll deal more damage to tankier units. So of the two options, Spark is better, as you want to shred as many units as possible near your frontline. This benefits both Mordekaiser as his ult is 2 hexes, but also Nora as her ult is AoE. Tanks are the problem for Mordekaiser to get through and sustain on. However, once he has scaled, backliners cannot survive Mordekaiser. But with that covered, we can now talk about Artifact. Wait, I meant artifacts. Generally speaking, artifacts are a huge thing for Mordekaiser Reroll because the comp has the potential to use literally all of them. For Mordekaiser, the best artifact is easily Unending Despair. With Unending, you convert Mordekaiser's huge shields into even more damage. Genuinely, this item is completely bonkers on Mordekaiser, and since it gives it armor, you can easily build it with BT and Archangels. However, you can't heal the damage from Despair through BT with Omnivamp. But speaking of Omnivamp, both Wits End and Death Stance can replace BT and be used by Mordekaiser, and what's nice is that they grant 30 MR and 30 armor respectively. Although Death Stance is superior as some of the damage Mordekaiser will take will be buffered into the shield. Death Stance especially benefits from Mordekaiser's buffed shield duration in this patch. Also, I'm worried I'm playing too much League because I keep on calling it Death Stance instead of Death Defiance. Uh-oh, that is not good. You also can't really go wrong with tank artifacts like Innovating Locket and Anima Visage, not Spirit Visage. Locket especially doesn't provide many resistances, so it prefers full tank Mordekaiser anyway. Honestly, Talisman is not that bad considering Mordekaiser will usually be the last unit alive. Although again, due to the lack of tank stats on the item, your build becomes somewhat constricted. Conversely, Forbidden Idol provides great stats and HP scaling to Mordekaiser, so it pairs incredibly well with Archangels and BT. This was on an older patch, 1419, so this will be even stronger now with the buffs to Yuumi, Mage and Mordekaiser. Granted, I still don't think Yuumi's heal will be able to keep up with Mord's massive HP bar, but what I realized from this game is that with such a massive HP pool, Mordekaiser really wants max HP regen. So you may think that Anima Visage, Unending Despair and Forbidden Idol is the best possible combination of Mordekaiser, but that is not the case. With these items, Mordekaiser does not have remotely enough AP for the shields to be remotely impactful. That is why I vastly prefer Living Forge over What the Forge, as you can cherry pick both your normal items alongside your artifacts. Turning everything into artifacts is somewhat bad for Mordekaiser because he may not be able to give him enough AP, and it's also bad for your backline carries like Nora or Nami because you can no longer give them anti-heal. Nonetheless, the max HP regen issue can be addressed through augments or support items, which we'll get to in a moment. For that, I'll mention that Blighting Jewel can be used well by Nora as she has DOT damage, and both Nora and Nami can use Mana's Aim well. There's 3 artifacts that are extremely situational, and that's Corrupt Vampiric Scepter, Prowler's Claw, and Spectral Cutlass. You can only really use these artifacts if you're re-rolling Warwick alongside Mordekaiser. In that case, these artifacts can either go to Warwick or maybe even Olaf, and you don't even need to re-roll Warwick. Honestly, I've not bothered experimenting with this area at all, because as soon as I see Forbidden Idol, I'm clicking that. And that was especially fantastic in this game because I got a support item that works so well with it. So we should probably talk about support items. Like most comps, any support item should work well with your board. However, there's a few I should emphasize you prioritize. There's obviously Randuin's Omen, which gives loads of resistances to your vanguards. There's also Moonstone Renewer, which will keep your vanguard shielded and proc the trait damage reduction. But lastly, and most importantly, I would heavily prioritize Virtue of the Martyr. The sustain from this item is unmatched, and it heavily swings the matchup in your favor with its max HP healing. I absolutely love this item because it's so much sustain for your board. There's also an adjacent augment that is similarly prominent, which is Martyr. This augment is similarly goated with Mordekaiser because they sustain him so well as many vanguards will perish before him. And of course, like support items, generic combat and reroll augments are good for Mordekaiser. Ideally, the game offers you Shields Up, the vanguard exclusive augment to give Mordekaiser insanely juicy shields and CC immunity. Similarly, other shielding augments like Combat Caster and Inspiring Epitaph are good, but they're not nearly as huge and juicy as Shields Up. But on that note, any augment that gives buffs to units that remain alive, like Avenge the Fallen, are excellent. You could also enjoy some fine vintage with Mordekaiser. I heard he takes his drinks well.
That was the real stuff.
But start of combat buffs are good too, like Find Your Center, which gives Mordekaiser more HP, bigger vanguard shields, and it kickstarts his damage amp scaling. And despite the nerfs to the item, I still like the Crown Guarded augment on Mordekaiser. It's just funny seeing that stupidly insanely massive shield at the start of combat. But out of all of the item augments, I prefer High Voltage, as the entire enemy board gets shredded and the vanguard you put the spark on will stay alive. But there's also augment traps. Like you may see Anger Issues Mordekaiser doing really well in the stats, however that is likely due to Warwick reroll performing so well. So if you take this augment then you should reroll Warwick, or if you just want to send it and see what happens. abilities. Likewise, you may think that long distance powers would be insane if both Nora and Mordekaiser both have Archangels. However, Mage has something else to say. Mage reduces the extra AP Nora and Mordekaiser are sharing with each other, and so you're only really taking it to give Nora resistances. But this augment is vastly better if you can hit higher breakpoints of Mage, and so lessening the AP deficit. But overall, the Horned King and the Cat is incredibly flexible with augments, items, and openers. You can play the 6 Vanguard frontline alongside practically any backline carry you want. I guess the feline flexibility is coming into play, huh? But speaking of backline, you can make Mordekaiser wrap onto the enemy backline by placing him near the edges of your frontline. Sounds kind of confusing to say. Frontline, backline, whatever. Regardless, as usual, this comp has been so much fun to research, so thank you again to everyone who participated in the community poll and all the help I received in Discord. Especially to Carlos and Fungal, you guys helped so much, I really appreciate it, thank you. So of course, remember to subscribe to participate in future polls or join the Discord so we can directly chat about future projects. Also check out the Bubble Trouble guide, as both this and that guide overlap quite well. And I think that covers everything. Once again, I'd like to thank my supporters and Twitch subs for making this video possible. As a bi-weekly reminder, I guess at this point, you guys are awesome. Although I think my upload schedule is a bit scuffed. Regardless, at this point, let me pass over some questions to you guys. What do you think about the Horned King? Is this comp as fun and insane as I think it is? Or is it absolutely terrible, mod sucks, and I should stop making these guides? Let me know in the comments, and of course, remember to subscribe. Anyway, check out these other videos if you want to see more from me, and as always, thank you for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.